What's up, everybody? Thanks for checking into my YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk not about how to read more, but to read more efficiently. And then we're going to find out that perhaps we actually do read a little bit more. My name is Matt Everhart. I'm the pastor of Gospel Fellowship PCA, a Reformed church just north of Pittsburgh. If you're looking for a Reformed, Bible-believing church, takes the Word of God seriously, loves Jesus, on a mission to share the good news of the gospel with the world, you found one, come check us out, Gospel Fellowship PCA, just north of Pittsburgh. All right, so today's topic is how to read more. I get this question quite a bit, especially on some of my productivity posts that I do from time to time. I give tips about pastoral time management and things like that. I have a lot of people, especially young guys, that ask me, not that young gals don't ask me as well, but ask me about readings, especially reading commentaries, reading good books, how to read more, to ingest more material, how to find time to do that, all these reading related questions. And so I do want to address that topic this morning because it is pretty important. The first thing I would say is that it is better to read more efficiently than to simply read more. And so a couple of the tips that I'm going to give in the forthcoming information doesn't have to do with volume of pages. In fact, I want to get you out of the habit of thinking in terms of volume of pages and thinking instead towards ingesting quality materials into the mind, into the heart, so that it truly infiltrates who you are, your thinking, especially as these books are good, helpful, edifying, and doctrinally healthy books for you. So let's first of all set aside the idea that to read more is better than to simply read efficiently. If I had to choose between the two, I'm taking reading efficiently over reading more. And so one of the first things that necessitates for me is I would rather read good books than more books. Okay, so there's a principle. Read better books. And usually for me, that's somewhat equivalent to saying read old books. Old books tend to be classics because they've withstood the test of time. If every successive generation is kind of like a filter, the good books are the ones that make it through that filter of chronology. And so very often if people ask me the question, hey, did you read the new book on ... My answer is no, because I almost rarely, if ever, read new books anymore. Not to say that I wouldn't. In fact, some books come out and they're kind of instant classics, very important and relevant for contemporary conversations. But most of the time, if I had a choice, it's older books and better books versus newer books and more contemporary books. And so what that allows me to do is narrow the canon of the books that I'm interested in over time. One of the things that I would say to you is you should probably have in your mind at least, a canon of the most important books that you want to cover in a lifetime. And that's going to mean you can't read everything. And so if you want to be the kind of person that reads every book, just throw that out. It is impossible. Pick better books and read them more efficiently. I reread a lot of classic books. There are certain books that I want to read multiple times. Augustine's Confessions is one of those books. I would select the most important books and spend your lifetime reading and rereading those books, even if your canon is necessarily somewhat smaller. I read The Institutes of the Christian Religion by John Calvin a number of years ago, and that book is so big and so hard and so dense and so important that what I wanted to do is really make sure I understood the book rather than just to get through it. So I have it up there on my shelf behind me. You can probably see over my shoulder. It's dark black book. Maybe you can't. Don't worry about it. And in the front cover, I wrote myself a little dedication. And I said to myself in the dedication, today I set out on the journey to complete this book. I will keep reading this book no matter how long it takes me to get through it, even if I have to read one page at a time. And that's exactly what I did. It took me about a year to read Calvin's Institutes because I read just 1 to 3 pages at a time. And so that's one of the things that I would suggest that you do. Eliminate the idea that you have to read a lot to learn something, and instead concentrate on the idea that you should read efficiently to understand what you're reading. So we're taking notes. We're highlighting in the margins. We're cross-referencing some information into our miscellaneous journals. We're cross-referencing some passages into our Bibles because we're reading good, important works. And it would be so much better for you to read the Institutes of the Christian Religion one time and understand it than to probably read 25 of the Christian Book Evangelical Association Top Books of the Year 2020. It's going to be more profitable for you to read one great book and really understand it than it is to read a bunch of those other books. So what I like to do is set myself very modest goals for each reading setting. You know, you're going to sit down, you're going to spend some time in this book. Set yourself a very modest goal. I take my little little sticky tab, and I typically move it 3 pages into the book. And my goal is simply to read 3 good pages of a very good book when I sit down. If I get through that and my brain is still alert and on the ready, I might move that tabby 2 more pages back. Maybe I'm going to read 5. But typically what I find is that the good books are the hard books because they have great ideas, and great ideas take a lot of time to process mentally. So you're going to want to make sure you just slow down and be patient with yourself. Give yourself several months to read a good book. Do not be in a hurry to slam through it. And here's another tip of something that I do quite a bit. And this may seem counterintuitive to reading efficiently, but I think you'll see that it actually helps. As I tend to read 2 to 3 books at a time. Well, what do you mean by that? You can't hold 2 to 3 books. No, I don't mean that necessarily. But in any given time, I'm typically working through a couple of different books. And so what I like to do is read 2 to 3 pages of this one, and then 2 to 3 pages of this one, and 2 to 3 pages of that book, perhaps even in the same setting. But what I find is that if I switch books, then it actually hits the reset button in my brain, and I can spend maybe 30 minutes reading with good full comprehension, as over against just 10 minutes when I find that I'm just slogging through and barely understanding what I'm reading. So sometimes switching up the setting actually helps my brain to re-engage. It's kind of like when you're watching a movie, any movie these days, each scene is only just a few seconds long before they're constantly switching scenes. There's something about the way the brain is wired that it likes new looks, it likes new visual, new background. It keeps the brain attentive and focused. And it's the same thing when you're reading a book. Switch it up after 10 minutes and switch over to the other book. Now again, it's going to take you a while to get through the books because now you're spreading your time over 2 to 3 different volumes rather than just plugging away through one particular book. But again, here's the main key. Comprehension is greater than volume. Great books are better than new books. And so working slowly is often better than working quickly through our reading material. Now I'll say one more thing here, and this has to do with Bible reading, because for some of you, maybe you're not even interested in reading other great books, but you just want to read your Bible more efficiently. Well, the same principles are true, in that it's better to read for comprehension than it is to read for volume. And so sometimes those Bible reading plans can be really, really good and helpful because they keep you motivated. If you're the kind of person that likes checking off the boxes on a chart, then by all means keep plugging away at that. But it's better to read for comprehension. So what I like to do when I'm reading in my morning devotions, for instance, is I have 4 different sticky tabs somewhere in my Bible. Maybe, let's say I have Pentateuch, poetic material, prophets, and then 1 in the New Testament. And what I find is if I read just 1 chapter in each place, then I've read 4 chapters, and I find that my brain is fresh and alert and attentive, rather than if I just tried to read 4 chapters straight through of the Psalms or of Deuteronomy or of the Gospel of Matthew, whatever it is I happen to be reading. 4 different places tends to keep the brain fresh and alert as over against 4 chapters in the same book. So overall, those are my principles. I'd rather read 1 good book than 10 new books. I'd rather aim small and miss small when it comes to comprehension so that I make sure I'm truly getting what it is that I'm supposed to be reading. And going back to the great books, again, let's say you're reading a classic book. I read Moby Dick this way a couple of years ago. Don't be ashamed to get a few helpers when it comes to the great classic books, because you really do want to understand what you're reading if you're going to spend all that time. I did that with Frankenstein. I did that with Moby Dick. I've done it with other books that I really want to understand. Go to the old Spark Notes or the Cliff Notes or whatever. A lot of the stuff is online. And make sure to read some of the chapter summaries so that you can really stay stay sharp on what your brain is supposed to be processing. What are you supposed to get out of this chapter? Well, I guess I've said enough for the moment on reading. What I'd like to do now is in the description of this video, I'm going to post a few books that I consider lifers. These are in my canon of most important books to read. These are the books that I really want to know and to understand. If you want to know what I'm reading right now, I happen to be working through some of the great classic works of Plato, the great Greek philosopher. Taking a lot of notes on Greek philosophy just as kind of an interest of mine right now. So I'm reading a lot of Plato, just trying to work through some of the dialogues in a way that I comprehend it and get it. But you pick what's important to you, and I'll throw some suggestions in the description box of this video so you can hop over to Amazon and get some of the ones I suggest. But don't think necessarily these are the only ones that are out there. But they will be, I'll just say 10, I'll put 10 classics on there of books that you definitely want to get and read at some point in your life. And make sure you read to understand. All right, thanks for checking into this YouTube video. Do love you lots, and we'll talk to you later.